This is CBC News Roundup.
Tonight, the signing of the North Atlantic Treaty.
Today in Washington, 12 countries representing 330 million people signed the North Atlantic Security Pact. 12 countries of the free world lined up against aggression. The foreign ministers signed the pact in alphabetical order. First to sign was Belgium. Next, Canada.
It is now the turn of Canada.
The Honorable Lester B. Pearson, Secretary of State for External Affairs of Canada.
Also, Ambassador Hume Wrong will sign the treaty. Now, Mr.
Excellency Hume Wrong, Ambassador of Canada.
He takes his seat, with his good right arm, signs the treaty.
The other 10 countries followed in order: Denmark, France, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, the United Kingdom, and finally, the United States. Before the signatures were affixed to the defense document, each of the foreign ministers spoke briefly. All of them stressed that this was a non-aggressive alliance, and most of them said the pact was necessary because the United Nations could not offer security. Canada's Minister for External Affairs, Mr. Pearson, said the pact was born out of fear and frustration. Here is part of his address.
Last week, the Parliament of Canada, with only 2 dissenting voices, endorsed the treaty which we sign here today. This virtual unanimity reflected the views of the whole Canadian people, who feel deeply and instinctively that this treaty is not a pact for war, but a pledge for peace and progress. The North Atlantic Treaty was born out of fear and frustration. Fear of the aggressive and subversive policies of communism and the effect of those policies on our security and well-being. Frustration over the obstinate obstruction by communist states of our efforts to make the United Nations function effectively as a universal security system. This treaty, though born of fear and frustration, must, however, lead to positive social, economic, and political achievements if it is to live. Achievements which will extend beyond the time of emergency which gave it birth, or the geographical area which it now includes. This treaty does not of itself ensure peace. No treaty can do that. It does, however, give us the promise of far greater security and stability than we possess today. By our combined efforts, we must convert this promise into performance, or the treaty will remain no more than yet another expression of high but unattained ideals. That will not happen to our North Atlantic Pact if each of us accepts the challenge it proclaims, if each of us, with trust in the goodwill and peaceful policies of the others, strives to make it something more than words. We know that we can do this. If it were not so, we would not today be giving this pledge to stand together in danger and to work together in peace. We of this North Atlantic community, the structure of which we now consolidate, must jealously guard the defensive and progressive nature of our league. There can be no place in this group for power politics or imperialist ambitions on the part of any of its members. This is more than a treaty for defense. We must, of course, defend ourselves, and that is the first purpose of our pact. But in doing so, we must never forget that we are now organizing force for peace, so that peace can one day be preserved without such force. We are a North Atlantic community of 12 nations and 350 million people. We are strong in our lands and our resources, in our industry and manpower. We are strong, above all, in our common tradition of liberty, in our common belief in the dignity of the individual, in our common heritage of social and political thought, and in our resolve to defend these freedoms together. Security and progress, however, like peace and war, are indivisible. So there must be nothing narrow, nothing exclusive about our lead. No slackening of our interest in the welfare and security of all friendly peoples. The North Atlantic community is part of the world community, and as we grow stronger to preserve the peace, all free men grow stronger with us.
The last speaker was President Truman. Twice he said that the pact would be challenged as an alliance of aggression, and twice he denied it vehemently.
There are those who claim that this treaty is an aggressive act on the part of the nations which ring the North Atlantic. That is absolutely untrue. The pact will be a positive, not a negative influence for peace. And its influence will be felt not only in the area it specifically covers, but throughout the world. Its conclusion does not mean a narrowing of the interests of its members. Under my authority and instructions, the Secretary of State has recently made it perfectly clear that the adherence of the United States to this pact does not signify a lessening of American concern for the security and welfare of other areas of the world, such as the Near East. The step we're taking today should serve to reassure peace-loving peoples everywhere and pave the way for the worldwide stability and peaceful development which we all seek. Twice in recent years, nations have felt the sickening blow of unprovoked aggression. Our people, to whom our governments are responsible, demand that these things shall not happen again. We are determined that they shall not happen again. In taking steps to prevent aggression against our own people, we have no purpose of aggression against other people. To suggest the contrary is to slander our institutions and defame our ideals and our aspirations. The nations represented here are bound together by ties of long standing. We're joined by a common heritage of democracy, individual liberty, and rule of law. These are the ties of a peaceful way of life. In this pact, we are merely giving them formal recognition.
Just one final act remains before the North Atlantic Defense Alliance becomes a binding treaty. The governments of the 7 major countries must ratify it. This has been CBC News Roundup. The reports were recorded earlier. CBC News Roundup will not be heard tomorrow night, but will be back on Wednesday at the usual time. Bill Reed speaking. This is the Trans-Canada Network of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
And from April 4th, 1949, that's the CBC radio coverage of the creation of NATO.